Welcome, Impactful Parents! It's time for the Impactful Parenting Podcast, where I give you parenting tips and resources to make you a more impactful parent to your school-age child. I am your host, Kristina Campos. Welcome, Impactful Parents. Today we're going to talk about, is my child musical? With all the effort and investment it takes to put kids in music lessons, it's hard to know if it's always the right move. So, what are some signs that your child can benefit from music? And if you already have a child embarking on their musical journey, how do you prevent burnout? Hello, my name is Kristina Campos. I'm founder of The Impactful Parent, and I help parents of school-age children who want to be one step ahead of their kids to turn their chaos into connection with their adolescents. I'm a mom of four, a teacher that's taught every grade from preschool through high school, and today I help my moms and dads like yourself to navigate that exhausting, confusing, frustrating, but rewarding world of parenting. So welcome to The Impactful Parents. And today I have a special guest. His name is Michael Hensworth. Michael got his college degree in piano at the age of 18, and after he quickly started a music school. Today, 22 years later, his music school is thriving with over 1,200 students, and his passion for music shines through for everyone who knows him. This year, he even wrote a book for parents to help them navigate the challenges of raising creative and musical kids. I'm happy to have Michael on the podcast today to discuss music lessons. Which kids benefit the most from music lessons? And hopefully answer many of our questions about raising a child that enjoys music without getting the burnout.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Michael, I'd like to start with the readiness of music lessons. How can parents determine if their child is ready to start formal music lessons? For example, are there any developmental signs or perhaps milestones that indicate a child might benefit from learning music?
Sure. Well, and I like to really divide, there's some phases that happen really. And so up until about age 7, approximately, kids are these real musical sponges. And so we're building that sense of what we call aptitude there. So I like to describe that stage as when we're putting a lot of stuff in. And after that, and for the rest of your life, you utilize that aptitude and you bring stuff back out. And so it's not like, like all your skills are developed by the age of 7, but a lot of the brain development actually happens really early on. So there's a lot of benefits both ways. So looking first at those early stages there, almost everybody can benefit, from that pouring in portion about music. And that doesn't just happen in formal music lessons. Obviously, that's a great place where, we as professionals can create a crafted environment, but that also has just so much to do with parenting. I mean, like doing rhythmically based activities, singing with your child, good or bad, these are all things that they're almost always ready for and are going to benefit from in terms of brain development. Now, when to put them into something like, well, now I'm going to be learning the piano. Interest is a huge one of those things. When there's that sustained interest in an instrument, that's a great sign. The ability to have some of those coordinated rhythmic motions. But again, some of those things, even if they're not there yet, could benefit from getting up to speed in some of those musical skills early on.
Can musical ability be developed, or is it mostly innate? For example, I don't feel like I have any musical talent, and there is no amount of singing lessons that is going to make me a great singer. I'm just not that talented in that way. So what do you say to parents that worry that their child just isn't that musically inclined?
Yeah, I mean, not everybody is going to Juilliard. I will give you that. But I have really yet to meet a student that doesn't benefit from music instruction in some way, in some sort of way when you're looking at focus and confidence and things like that. So some of it depends on what you're really looking to get out of it. It is the question, and because this is huge, is the question going in like, am I putting my child into this instrument to see if they're going to be like, quote unquote, really good at it? Or is there some other type of personal development that I want to see them gain out of that? Because yes, they might end up liking basketball more than guitar, but that doesn't mean that they didn't actually retain something that's going to, affect the rest of their life through the experience.
How does a child's learning styles, and in some cases, some learning challenges, affect kids when they're trying to learn music?
Yeah, at our school, we work with a lot of students that have a variety of special needs. And honestly, it's just such a great privilege as well, because I think really when you get into some of these creative spaces that you realize that a lot of the same techniques that work with students that have learning differences actually work with all of us. We just need to be able to adapt them there. And so as a music teacher, really, I think, or as a parent looking at a music teacher, you really do want somebody that is ready to pivot with a student. And that's definitely true with when we work with kids that have learning challenges, but that really happens with any of them as well too. A really classic example is highly visual learners. I'm a very visual learner, and so I fit pretty well into the sort of classical piano kid mold because you could give me a piano book and I liked reading the sheet music, and temperamentally and learning skills wise, I fit in that box. And so really it helped me early on. But then I turned around and worked with some students, and opening the book was like hitting a brick wall. And there will be some students, some teachers, some parents, especially if they've had the experience where they themselves are more successful as a visual learner, and they'll, you know, see that as not musical. And that's almost never the case. In fact, sometimes I've met some of the most musical students that are very book averse because they are so strong in an auditory sense. I've worked with a student that he's 11 now, and I've worked with him since he was in preschool music phase, and he's almost never done the expected outputs. He's almost never done the activity the way that you would expect in sort of a neurotypical environment. But he's brilliant, and he has almost perfect pitch, excellent recall, and there's been so many ways we've been able to layer those skill sets if we've been willing to go his way. What's the song that you got in your head already today? And I need to be able to step back and say, okay, you're maybe not going to fit in my box of lesson plans today, but that's okay. We can build skills with what you're giving me right now. And I will say, our kids encounter plenty of environments where they get told, well, you're not musical. and
Yeah.
it's so terrible. And as adults, I meet people constantly that say, oh, I took piano when I was a kid and I really liked it, but then such and such told me that I was bad at it, and I just stopped. And so I think we really have to shield them from that as well too, and look for what their actual skill sets are, because there's absolutely a way that you can use that skill set in music, whether you are much more kinesthetic, you are much more auditory. That can be your superpower when it comes to music.
Is there a way for parents to tell if their child has a natural aptitude for music? For example, we hear about that musical ear. What can parents look out for?
Sure. Sure. I mean, children that match pitch, that sing accurately early on is a very great thing to build on. And there's a discriminatory element as well too. When we're actually trying to do some evaluation, we're looking to see, what's the listening skill there. If I play two things and I ask you whether they're the same or different, the greater your accuracy is, the more musically supercharged your brain has been. So that's one of the things that we just look at. I'm going to play this and this. Were they the same or were they different? And the better that they are at that, the better it can be. Again, also those coordinated motions as well, being able to move in various rhythmic fashions is really, really important, and it's going to really help them. But again, if they don't have those rhythmic skills, maybe they're not going to Juilliard, but they're really going to help at some point. All the people that grew up and say they can't dance, they needed to do some more clapping when they were kids, because we all need a little bit of that in order to get our brains working the right way.
When is it too early or too late for getting the benefits of learning a new musical instrument?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely never too late. I mean, if you're 55 and you want to play the piano, I will always, always, always tell you go for it. I will tell people, like, give yourself 5-year-old expectations. Don't expect that because you're 55 magically you get to skip the process, but that you're never too old. In terms of too young, I think a lot of it has to do with the application. Because if you're, for instance, going to take traditional piano lessons, then a lot of it has to do with focus, and a little bit has to do with fine motor skills. Now, if it is too early to take piano lessons, there's a lot of other general musical activities that I definitely endorse, but you do have to consider some of the amount of coordination that it's going to take. And focused activity. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to sit for 30 minutes, because I think a good music teacher is going to, give you a variety of activities, and we're going to stand up and we're going to move. So I'm not saying, like very sustained concentration, but you need to give me at least a good 5 minutes, at this task before we're going to actually have instruments that we have homework on. And it's going to vary based on the instrument as well too. The piano and to some degree the violin are really well suited to the smaller hands and early motion there. If you really are passionate about guitar, I tell the 5-year-olds to start with the ukulele, but it's really more like 7, 8 that some of the fine motor skills come into play with those things. Same thing with instruments you play like in school band. There's a certain amount of air that you have to develop as well. So it will also be specific somewhat to the instrument as well.
How important is the choice of an instrument? And what advice do you have for parents that are unsure about which instrument their child should learn?
Well, I wish I had a magic formula that you'll never spend all that money to buy the clarinet and then they change their mind. It happens to everybody, and I haven't been able to magically crack that. Kids do change their minds sometimes. I think one of the most common things that we hear, there's this kind of traditional lore that everybody should start with the piano first. And a lot of times now people just kind of generally feel that that's true and they don't really know why. So I'll speak to that. If you have no specific interest, then yes, the piano is a great early start because it covers a huge range of things. And in terms of fine motor skills, is pretty user friendly to smaller hands, and it's very literal. So again, when there's that math sort of spatial awareness component, and the piano is great because when you're looking at how notes are written down and how you're looking at how they're laid out on a piano, there's a lot of correlation on a piano. So there's some things that the light bulb goes on a little easier with a piano than it does with another instrument. Now, that being said, I think if you take into account, that level of fine motor skills that it's going to take and the level of passion there, if you really love the guitar, don't suffer through 2 years of piano before you get to do the thing that you really like to do. I think you should really start with where you experience that passion, because that's where the motivation comes from. Is, if I see this related to something that I really want, then the motivation has already gone 10 steps up. And so when we have taken that part away and told you, well, I know you don't really want to do this, but you just have to do it anyway, we have to fight so much harder up that motivation scale in order to get practice being successful. And something that you do want to practice for 10 minutes a day, and something that I have to fight you every day to practice for 10 minutes a day, are never going to equal the same results, no matter how perfect the piano is, as a starter instrument.
Okay, let's talk about burnout now. From my experience with my own kids, it wasn't the lessons that made them turn away from music, it was the practice sessions at home. Parents are constantly nagging their child to practice, and this nagging becomes one of the first thorns in the child's love for music. So if that nagging persists, before you know it, your child wants to quit. So how can parents navigate this difficult dynamic so that their child doesn't experience burnout?
And, I surprise a lot of people with this with my own kids, because everybody assumes that all my kids started taking piano lessons when they're 5, and, they've got the notebooks, and we have a chart up, and at 5 p.m. the timer goes on and they have to do their 20 minutes of piano. There's this image of what the perfect piano student is, and that my kids are somehow in this mold. And none of my kids are in this mold at all. So, we have really tried to watch our own children and channel, again, their strong points there. And there's varying degrees of motivation. So my oldest is an excellent singer naturally. She loves to perform. So a lot of her background is in singing. And then she's done instrumental things that really support it. Like she's plays enough piano that she can do while she's singing. So we've layered those together, and then looked for those performance opportunities as well too, because that was so motivating for her to have something on stage that she was going to get ready for. And my other two do not want to go on stage ever if they can help it, and we validate that part as well too. My son plays the drums, and he enjoys it. A big part of our goal is because he has auditory processing disorder. There's a lot of things that we know are kind of connecting in in that drumming activity. So secretly, all we really care about is that, brain development. We care about having a positive role model in his teacher, in something that he enjoys doing. And we know he doesn't practice, and we don't, like, it's not the situation where I go to the dentist and I lie and I tell them that I floss, constantly. We we we, we have this arrangement with this teacher as well too, and we both know that we're okay with this, and that yes, we'd love for him to practice more, but that there's no shame in where he's at right now.
I have to stop you right there. Thank you for being real. Like, yes, finally, like each kid is going to be different. I have 4 kids of my own, and I don't treat them all the same way. Why? Because they're all different and need different things. A few of my kids need some more reminders, which sometimes ends up getting interpreted as me nagging at them. But I also have a few kids that don't need reminders and can work independently without me having to monitor or do the whole nagging thing. But music lessons, it gets such a pressure to practice. It feels as though when you begin, there is this huge expectation that practice will be done at home. And it goes back to, what is your child's goal? For your second child, the goal wasn't perfection or music talent. His goal was just to have fun and have more connectivity inside of his brain and dabble into a new skill. And he is doing that. And I love that you are being real with our parents and having us evaluate what is the goal for taking music. What's our goal? What's their goal? And then maybe practice isn't the most important thing. Another reminder that every child is different.
So, my youngest is actually incredibly passionate about the guitar right now. She started basically at last year as a 12-year-old. So, I mean, she has a lot of musical exposure. So, there was definitely foundation laid in terms of general understanding about music and things like that without the formal like lesson routine. But also, my child has OCD, and she has decided to channel that towards the guitar. And so we're just running with that. And again, it's something that we're very clear, and we partner with her teacher as well too. And so he and I have these discussions as well. And he comes into lessons with that same understanding. He's like, I have, my step by step that I like to have, but she comes in and she's already hyper focused on whatever the thing was that she discovered that week. She's got a hyper focus on, and I agree to use that and to channel that. And instead of say, well, no, you have to go chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. It's like, if all we're going to do is Metallica this week, that's okay. And so she practices a lot, but she only practices the thing that she really wants to practice. And so also facilitating that's okay, and that we can especially work with a teacher that's flexible enough to agree with us and say, okay, like practice does not have to look the same, like for every child, like everybody got this practice calendar and everybody has to do it the same way. That really opens the door to making this an experience that kids really enjoy. And that's what we all love about music. We all, no matter if you've like studied an instrument or not, we love music. We enjoy it. So why in the heck would we want to suck all the fun out of that?
What are the signs that it is time to call it quits? Parents nagging isn't the only thing that leads kids to burnout. Is there a time when you recommend quitting music lessons? What should parents be looking out for to know when it's time just to throw in the towel?
For sure. And, I always premise this with this is that quitting does not have to be considered final. I don't ever get in the mindset that, well, we tried the music thing and it just didn't work, because I quit music when I was in 4th grade. My first thing I did, I joined band with my dad's trumpet, and it was a bad match. And, it was a teacher that I did not enjoy working with. It was a format that I didn't enjoy working with. Being in a large band rehearsal didn't really cut it for me the same way it did in a one-on-one lesson. It was an instrument I didn't really like. So I always tell people, look at the things you can change first, because it's definitely not an all or nothing scenario. It's not like music is this one thing. And so always look for changes first, like if the piano's not going well, is it an option that you could try playing the guitar? If you're not connecting with a certain teacher, maybe there's another one that you will. If, reading music is a burnout, could you just scrap that altogether and learn only songs that you're going to play from memory or that you play by ear? You know, being willing to pull those strings first, I think, is a great first step to helping kids. And I think that there's a valuable transferable lesson there too, that when it's not working in a certain way, before we just say, well, that's just not for me, can we pivot and look at it a different way? Can we have that flexibility there? However, if you've tried some of the pivots there and it's not working and there is not really that joy in that process, it's okay to stop the routine. And it's okay to really be aware that music is a part of your whole life as well too. And so if it's a responsibility tacked on top of a lot of other responsibilities, there's an amount of overwhelm too. So some ebb and flow where we need to take some time and step back and then be able to come back to it later can really be useful. I know lots of kids that, this is what I tell people too, like, don't sell the guitar because you quit guitar lessons in the first week, because I've seen lots of kids that needed that breather, that empty space. And then when the pressure is not there every week, you find that, 6 weeks later, 3 months later, they're secretly playing the guitar in their room when I didn't need to tell them to, because there's still something there that they're trying to figure out. But yes, the pressure does not have to be on 24/7. Understand what your goals are. And for most parents I work with, the goal is a positive experience that you can grow from. And that can come a lot of ways. And that can also be damaged a lot of ways if you just feel like, plow straight through, straight ahead, kicking or screaming, we're just going to do it this way.
Do kids really need to practice music every day? I mean, if the goal is just to have fun and dabble in a new skill, is it detrimental to allow your child to not practice or have a different kind of music schedule? For example, maybe we only take music lessons on summer break so that we can avoid the school year chaos. I feel like this is greatly frowned upon, but what's your take?
Well, I would say one huge thing, before we get to the scheduling itself too, that I think has a huge impact is the shift about giving students stuff that they are good at as homework versus stuff that they're not. I don't quite know where this mentality came from, but a lot of our music teacher kind of world is, come to me, I'm going to explain something new, and then I'm going to send you home to master it. And that actually is a very difficult scenario to say, I'm pushing you out the door and you're at like 20% understanding of whatever this new skill or concept is. And now you're on your own, and I want you to come back at 80 to 100%. And a lot of times we have to flip that model and say, okay, I want you to go out the door at 80%. And then I want you to just cement that 80% in this week. So practicing is not about going from can't do it to can do it. It's going to go from can do it to can do it even better and with more enjoyment. So I think that as teachers, we have to really also start with that practicing is not always about, starting something new that you can't do. And if, you've learned songs 1 through 10 in your book, practice is not always about song 11. Going back and playing song 1 through 10 more is very valid and legitimate. And we should not always be thinking, okay, well, the only practice that counts is like the hard stuff that you've never done before. So validating things that students are good at and letting them build on that success, I think is huge, because when we all do things we feel successful at, then we want to do more of it. And so I think that's what we should do with our music lessons as well too. Start with stuff that you already know, that you don't need to practice, but that you like to play. And I think that goes a long way too. And that leads, I think, somewhat to your point as well too, is that if you're doing things on a different kind of schedule, for instance, let's say you take lessons over the summer and you gain more material, can you keep playing throughout the school year without like getting lots of new material all the time? I think for sure. I do think that there's a level of routine that we all, need, that, working out, like when there's a little routine to it, it helps us just stay on it, when I don't have to start from scratch and, decide, when am I going to exercise this week? How am I going to exercise this week? If I just know, hey, I go to Zumba on Thursday, it helps. And sometimes that helps a lot with music as well too, is that having enough routine in there where there's that set point in the week that you can do it can really be helpful as well too. But again, if then that's the practice for the week and not a lot of other stuff gets done, it's different parents have different goals, but as far as I'm concerned, that can be okay, especially in different seasons. Because when soccer season comes around, I'd much rather that you come to piano once a week and we brush up on our skills and have a good time, and maybe we're not, like moving through new assignment, new assignment, new assignment. Maybe we don't play a recital in the same time as soccer season. But if you're willing and able to keep up the routine there, then when soccer ends, it's a little bit easier to ramp back up again than it is to just quit cold turkey and then turn it back on again. Because again, we have this measurement of like either you're all in or you're all out somehow. And I think music is something that we can engage in varying degrees in as the year goes through, because keeping in it over the course of a year, I think, is hugely valuable. But expecting that your entire year is going to have the exact same energy level is also not reasonable. So we have to be able to ride that seasonality as well too. And if summer we stop all the Beethoven songs and we only play Beatles songs, there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally legit.
Tell me about this book you made for parents about music lessons. What is it all about, and what can we find inside?
For sure. So my book is called Mr. Michael's Music Maker Manual, and then it's also called A Parent's Guide to Growing Creative Kids. And growing is a word in there. There's an analogy between a carpenter and a gardener. It's not my analogy, but it's one that I have adopted and I think a lot of. And I really started to think, okay, I meet parents constantly who are starting on this musical journey. And what do I want them to know so that we can be on the same page together? Because probably one of the most challenging things I see is that stop and start process. We're going to start piano, we're excited, and then we get to that first hurdle: soccer season, summer vacation, a hard part in the book, whatever that first block is, and it's going to come. I know it's coming. And a lot of times that resistance is where we drop out. And then we miss out on the other benefits, because there's a lot of benefits that I think students are getting in their social and emotional learning, in their ability to focus, to problem solve. There's so many side benefits that I call music like this super drug that's really working behind the scenes. That has nothing to do with how good of a piano player you feel like you are when you're 18. And so it was my real hope to communicate with parents, okay, besides what you see, besides what goes on stage in the recital, besides any of those things, this is what else hopefully is happening in the journey. And if we can kind of be on the same page there, hopefully we can make it a little bit farther down the road and not drop out at the first sign of trouble, and really legitimize that we're not just trying to pump out expert musicians. We are trying to pump out beautiful humans that express confidence and joy in the things that they do. And sometimes we have to reframe that week in, week out lesson routine if we're going to reach that goal.
This sounds like a great resource for parents. Tell me more. What is something parents can find inside the book that maybe they wouldn't expect?
Yeah. Well, hopefully you find it's a pretty easy read. It takes about 3 hours on the audiobook altogether. So this is on purpose not an extensive, heavy work, because I love learning about the neuroscience and, kids and creativity and educational reform and all these things. But, we're parents. We need the Cliff Notes version of it. So it should be a pretty easy read. And it addresses all of those questions about, if I'm not the expert, for instance, is it okay? Should they be playing Mozart, or is it okay if they just play rock music? Is something better? Is something worse? And, we discuss these various genres and the different roles that they play and the legitimate roles that they can all have. We talk about motivational styles and things that really give students that internal motivation. We talk about our philosophy at our school: imagine, practice, and share. That, learning music can feel like a massive undertaking. and that's what's exciting about it, frankly, as a musician, that, when you open a door and then it's like, wow, there's another world in here. And then you open another door, the massiveness of, the musical world can be really exciting, but it can be very intimidating if you're just like at the starting point. And so the part of the goal there too is to just legitimize each of those starting blocks, and so that you don't feel like I'm out of my league and I just don't know. And that instead you can be a little bit more in control about what your goals are, what your priorities are. That it's not just here, take my kid and do stuff with them, but that you as a parent really are the partner with a music teacher such as myself, and can make it far more successful because of the insights you have into your own kid, and hopefully the ambitions that you have for them as well too.
Tell us where parents can get this book.
It is Mr. Michael's Music Maker Manual. It is available on Amazon. The audiobook is in various places as well too. So Spotify, things like that, you can catch the audiobook. Our website, the New Songs Music School website, does have a page devoted to that as well, with places to order and find the audiobook and all those great links as well too.
Thank you for listening today. Remember to subscribe and share this podcast with a friend. And don't forget, the Impactful Parenting Podcast is an extension of the Impactful Parent community. Go to the Impactful Parent website and download the free Impactful Parent app so you don't miss a parenting tip that can help you and your family. Thanks for listening today. So go to theimpactfulparent.com and see you next episode.